Hi everyone and welcome back. Today we are going to see much information about the roadside instancing. So we are going to explain all its details and the menu, etc. So first of all, I'm going to turn on the wireframe and then import the roadside instancing into the scene and then reset all the transforms of what we have imported. Then I'm going to go inside the roadside instancing object and go into edit mode. Select the draw curve and set it to surface, okay? Not cursor, surface. Then I'm going to start drawing some curves, okay? Then in the main menu of the roadside instancing object, I am going to select the Roadscape object and it will start instancing object on the road. Just give it a minute. So there we go. We now have our objects that are instanced on the roadside of the road. The first setting of the menu is use collection. So if you click on use collection, of course everything disappears because we haven't specified a collection to instance. For example, let's try something. Let me disable this and I will create a new collection, okay? And I will say collection 2, whatever, it's okay. Now inside this collection, I'm going to create a cube, okay? And then I'm also going to create a cone, okay? And I'm going to create a cylinder. Perfect, so we have our 3 objects right there. So I want to set the origin to the bottom faces. I have an add-on for that. You can find one as well. Or you can do it manually. I'm not going to explain this. This is some Blender basics. So once this is done, we can go back into the roadside instancing. And now that we have a collection with some objects inside it, I can call this collection in here. And as you can see now, it will instance this object on the side of the road, okay? So this is how it works. Let's go back to these objects and just resize them. So maybe let's have this like so, and like so, okay? Then select everything and apply scale, okay? Let's go back to the roadside instancing and let's see how it is now. Okay, it's much better. Okay. So this is for the first option. You can use collection and then use a collection and have anything you want inside this. Okay. The second setting is the collection seed. The collection seed will simply change the seed of the distribution of the objects along the curve. Okay. So if you're not happy with the first distribution, you can always change the seed, unlimited seed, and then you can choose a seed that corresponds to your needs. Then we have away from road. Away from road is, as the name suggests, it will either set the instance closer to the road or farther away. So once you start going too far away, there will be some bugs because there is a raycast that is going on in order to always have the instance on the terrain of Roadscape and on the support. And if you go just too far, the raycast value will start being not enough and then it will start flying, etc. So this is roadside instancing, and so this is for objects that are meant to be on the roadside. So there's no reason to go so far, but you still have some room to play with. Okay, so for this moment, we are going to put this here. You know what? Let's just have those both the plow and the traffic pole inside the collection so that it just looks a little bit better. Okay, so the fourth option is instance every. Instance every says it will have an instance every 3 meters. Okay, if I increase this to 5, it's now 5 meters between instances. If I decrease it to 1, we have an instance every meter. Okay. Use terrain normals. Use terrain normals will calculate the nearby terrain normals and set the y-axis rotation of the object to the nearby terrain normals. Okay, so if you want your instance to be aligned with the terrain, you want to change this. If you want them to sit straight, like trees, for example, you want to keep this disabled. Okay. Next, realized instances. Realized instances will simply realize the instance, which means you have to click that. If you want to really turn this into real geometry, you have to enable this, okay? If you don't, the instance won't count as many and just as one, and it won't work, okay? So this is for export. You want to check this. Final z offset pass. So final z offset pass is just a final z offset of the instance compared to their original position. Okay, so this takes place at the very end of the process. Okay, it overrides everything, the raycast and everything. Okay. Shrink wrap bottom face. In order to shrink wrap the bottom faces of the instance, as you can see, when I toggle it on, we have the bottom faces of the pole that it's shrink wrapped to the terrain. So in order for this to work, you have to realize instances. Okay, it won't work otherwise. And we have a setting that can increase or decrease the shrink wrap taking place within this amount of centimeters from the bottom of the geometry, which means that it will shrink wrap the face that are within, if we go like this, 2 centimeters from the very bottom of the lowest point of the mesh, okay? And so if I activate this, it will work for this, but for this, it will also shrink wrap the top faces because they are not far enough from the bottom face in order to not shrink wrap, okay? If we select this value, if I reduce it, you will see that only the bottom is taking place here, but the bottom is too far from the top to use this with this instance. So we are going to leave this, and a good way to fix this issue here is to, if you instance plot, you want to use the terrain normals, okay? It's better, it will make the instance sit on the terrain, whatever the inclination and elevation of the terrain, okay? So, and as you can see, it works everywhere, okay? Very good. The next is randomized rotation. So this is very straightforward. If you click it, it will randomize the rotation of the object, okay? And then you can choose which axis of the mesh it will rotate on. So if we choose only Z, it will rotate them on the z-axis. That's basically what you want when you instance stuff on the side of the road. You want them to be rotated on the z-axis. Okay, so this will set up a random rotation. You can choose how much by how much degree, which is the range of the total rotation, random rotation, which means that if you enable it, each instance is capable of rotating between 0 degree to 180 degrees, and there will be a random number between this range, between 0 and 180 for each instance. It will be random, and then you can change the seed as well in order to change the rotation if it doesn't please you, okay? Then you have randomize a scale. So this is basically the same but for the scale. As you can see, as soon as we activate it, we have the scales that are randomized, and then you can choose a mean scale, okay? So how much the smallest instance will be, okay, and a max, okay, and then you can play with the range like so, and then you can also play with the seed, okay? So for this instance, I'm not going to use the scale. Notice that if you put the scale mean under 0, some instance will start facing toward underground. Okay, so that's probably not what you want. Maybe that's something that you want, but you can do it. Okay. So mean scale, we are going to do some thing like this, and a good way to do it, let's say you have trees, you do something like 0.5 to 1. and then you will have some variation on the scale. It will be some slight variation, but this is a good value for trees. Okay, I'm going to disable it. The next option is the instance default transform. Okay, so this is the default transforms of the instance, okay, before they are instanced and before they have their rotation and scale changed. Okay, so it is not recommended to change the instance default transform because those values have been set in order for the instanced object to be able to orient themselves towards the inside of the road. Okay, so don't play with this. There's no reason to, but it's not recommended. Okay, you should always favor a workflow where you simply reorient your objects as you wish manually, and then they should be instanced properly. Okay, so next we have the apex line only. Okay, so apex line only is a experimental feature. It's not perfect yet, but it's already there. What is its purpose? Its purpose is to instantiate only on the apex of the selected curve, which means that if I go into edit mode and I start drawing curves, okay, on where to instantiate instance, okay, so I'm just going to add a curve more into the corner, okay, so we can see better. Maybe I can have some here, maybe some here, okay. So what it does, let's see, we are going to add one here as well, okay, and also where there is a corner here. Okay, good. So what apex only does, apex only will instance some object only following the apex line of some curves, which means that the system will look for high variations between corners on the road, okay, and it will instance some objects only when there are high variation, and it will instance them based on a apex line, which means that if we look over here, the apex line, this is the apex line of the road, which the apex line would be to take like this and then match into the center here, and then exterior here. Okay, if you were to race on this road, you would like take exterior here, much inside here, inside, exterior here. Okay, and so that's what the apex line only does. It will instantiate only on the apex line, which means that if I go into edit mode and I set a sum here on the straight line, it won't do anything here because that's a straight line. But here we start to have a corner, and so it will calculate the apex line, the inside of the corner. The apex is the inside, okay? And if I go here, the apex is also the inside here, okay? As you can see here, this is a more complex situation because the apex in real life in here is exterior, interior, interior, exterior. It's just because of the layout of the road. Okay, so this is a fine example to how it works. And if you are not happy with the apex only, you can invert the selection, okay? And then it will be the opposite of the apex, okay? So this is how you can instance on sides only. If you have trouble knowing where it will instance some objects, you can activate the debug display, the debug selectors. And these selectors will tell you where the system will instance object, okay? And so the system will instance object within 3 meters from the selectors. Anything that is away beyond 3 meters of the selectors will be deleted. So if I increase this value, anything that is beyond 11 meters will be deleted. Anything that is within 11 meters will be kept. If I reduce it to 1, all objects that are within 1 meter of the selectors will be kept, okay? So you could change the distribution like so, okay? Increase it or reduce it. A good value is 3. But it also depends of the filter apex. And the filter apex is how much you filter the apex. So if we keep the selector showing up and we play with filter apex, we can see that the system is filtering where is an apex line, okay? So we can see that if I increase it, the system will reduce the apex line finding. If I decrease it, the system will elongate the apex line finding, okay? So a good value is 10 by default, and then you have a curve offset, which simply will put the selectors closer to the road or further away from the road. So this is useful if you want to change the instantiated, the objects that are instantiated along the selectors, okay? So it works, it's quite experimental, but it still works, and that can be useful if you want to instance some stuff on the racing track and you want to use the apex line only without having to do it manually. So this can be really useful. And then you can choose how many selectors you want per meters, okay? And then their scale. And you have to know that their scale will change compared to their dispersion, okay? So this is something to remember. Okay, so this is about the apex line. If I disable the apex line, of course, it will draw on both sides, okay? And then we can disable the debug. Now we have the railings. So with the railings, what the railings will do, it will instance a rail on top of the highest object of the collection or of the single object if you are not using collection. So let's not use collection, let's only use this. We have to change the rotation, random rotation to Y, because this is well oriented and maybe the plow is not, okay, by default. And so as you can see here, the railing will be instantiated at the top of the instantiated object, okay? You can change by how much percent of the total height of the instantiated object the railing will sit on. So by default, it is 99, okay? So it's almost on the top. It's not quite on the top, but if we go 100, it will be straight on the top, and the railing will sit right in the middle of the top vertex of the instantiated object. Then to change the height of the lowest railing, you can change the total range, which means that the lowest railing is at 70 centimeters, like so, 70 centimeters on the top railing, okay? If I change it to 20 centimeters, the lowest railing will be 20 centimeters from the top railing, okay? So in this instance, let's keep it to 70 centimeters. You can then choose circular railings. Let me change something so that we can see closer. So you can use circular, and then you can change the resolution of the circular. If you set to circular, you might want to increase the radius, because if it's circular and the radius is too small, it will merge the circular into a quad, okay? So that's good. You can go with the circular and change the resolution, okay? Then you can enable gravity, okay? So gravity will fake some gravity between each instance in order to create some kind of rope-like barrier. And then you can change the subdivision of the gravity in order to make it more smooth or more jagged. And if you reduce it to 0, it will simply be a sign, okay? So 1 is good for low poly. Let's increase the instance every 5 meters, for example. And then we can, or maybe 5, it's a bit much, maybe let's go to 3. And then you can see that we have some rope-like railing, okay? So let's increase the gravity level to 2. Yeah, this is quite nice, okay? This one is a bit into the ground, so we will change the total range and reduce it a little bit, like so, okay? Then you have a quad rail width and height. This is basically the dimension of the quad rail if you're using quad, so not circular. So if I go like this, you can have a very wide rail, okay? Or you can have a very high rail, okay? If it's too high, it will start breaking on corner, okay? So let's go back to default values. You can shade smooth or shade flat the railings. So now this is shade flat, and if I turns shade smooth, it will be shade smooth. So this is useful if you just want to have quad railings and make them look like they are circular. And then you can play with the UV rotation and the UV scale. So if you have set a material for the rails that has a texture, you can change the unwrapping in here. Okay, great. Next, we have enable inner railing. So the inner railing is going to add a rail between the top and the lowest rail. Okay. And you can change how many rails you want inside. Okay, so by default it is set to 1. Okay, you can't go lower than 1 because it will be the same as disabling it. Okay, and then we can add as many inner rails as we want, because the more you add, the more laggy it is. Okay, so be careful with this setting. It's not recommended to go very high. Okay, so let's just set it to 2 maybe. Okay, so this is quite all right to me. This looks quite okay, but for this example we are going with only 0. Okay, and then you have exactly the same options as in the railing. This is for the dimensions and the UVs and the material. Okay, so I'm going to disable the inner railing for this demonstration, and I'm going to disable gravity. Okay, let's set back this to 99 degrees, and then you have panels. If you add panels, it will draw a full face between each instance. Okay, so this is useful if you want to create some barriers. You can then, you know, choose the pole, which will be the object. Okay, the pole will be the instance object. Then you can have some railings in order to close the panel, and then you can have a panel inside it. In here you can choose the material you will use for the panel, and then you have a control over the unwrapping of this material. Okay, and then you can also change the rotation. Now we don't see anything if I set it to 90 degrees because it won't change anything, but if I set it to 45 degrees, we now have square-like instead of a diamond-like texturing. So this is it. And then the last thing is to instantiate lights. So let's disable the panel, and let's disable the rails, and let's instantiate the street light in order to make sense with what we are going to do. So I'm going to set this into the collection, reset its transforms, go back into there, remove the collection, and change this to use the street light. And we want to use the RSEA ENV street light. Okay, RSEA stands for Roadscape Environment Asset. Okay, so this is always named like that in here for all the assets of Roadscape, and this is the ones you want to instantiate. Okay, the other one is the light itself. You don't want to instance the light in the instance object. Okay, so we want less light. Let's say we want a light every 10 meters. Okay, and let's disable the random rotation. Okay, and as you can see, as we didn't change the value in here in the instance default transform, the instance are correctly orienting themselves towards the center of the road. So this is why we didn't touch this earlier, and that I told you to not do so. Okay, because otherwise it will break everything in here. Okay. So now that we have some lights instantiated on the side of the road, you can always change how much they sit from, how far they sit from the road or close. Okay. And then in this instance, we will instantiate some lights. So let's go instance light. Okay. So by default, it is not showing because for instantiating lights to work, we have to disable realize instances. Okay, and so as you can see, it has now instantiated the light because we have realized the instance. Okay, why do we realize instance in order to have the light showing? It's a thing with Blender, with the geometry nodes. You cannot instantiate light on points unless the instance are not realized. Which means that if we were to export this and to have the light showing up, we would have to do it in 2 steps. We would have to have one duplicate of this object, which has the light only and which is not realized instance checked. and one which has only the streetlight mesh and which has realize instance checked. I'm going to demonstrate this in a few moments. So now this is also still in a work in progress, because as you can see, the rotation of the light is not perfect. Some are pointing upwards and some are pointing downwards. So a recommendation that I make to you is to only use point style lights, okay? Don't use a spot, use point, okay? This is better. And so, as you can see, we now have lights which are instantiated. If I change the HDRI to just a single color, we can see that we now have some lights which are instantiated in our scene, okay? So this is basically how you do it. Now let's see how we can export everything, okay? So let's go back with the HDRI. And let's see how we can export everything without lights first and then with, okay? So in order to export those instances, you have to click Realize Instances, okay? Then you select the object and do, let me see, I'm just going to duplicate this first, okay? So you select this object and you do Control A, Visual Geometry to Mesh, okay? Once you have done that, all the instances are now turned into real geometry, okay? So this is good. This is for mesh, okay? But let's say you wanted to have your light as well. As I said, you don't want, if you want to have light, you should not instance mesh, and then you should simply instance some light. And then you have to uncheck Realize Instance, okay? Now the transforms here in the instance lights are made to position the light compared to the mesh. This way you can correctly instance the position of the light compared to the mesh. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to change it back to default. And so now on this object, we have only the lights which are instanced and not any object. And we have the realized instance which is not checked. So this is what we want. I'm just going to duplicate it just to have a copy of it. And we select back the generator with only the lighting instancing. And we, instead of doing a Control A, Visual Geometry to Mesh, we click on Make Instance Real, okay? And if I click this, it will make all the lights real, okay? And so now your lights are real, they are not instance anymore, and everything is ready to be exported to Game Engines or whatever, okay? So this is how you do it for instancing lights, and to export as well instance generated with the side object instancing. I hope this video was helpful. It was concise enough for you to understand everything. I will upload a quick hotfix because I had to fix something in the Apex line section. So make sure to update your Roadscape. And yeah, this is it about this this generator. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.